I was horribly burned trying to save my fiancée, but she turned around and married my illegitimate half-brother. While I was left to starve to death in a basement, they were exchanging rings at a lavish wedding. When I opened my eyes again, I was reborn at the moment the fire broke out. Gazing at Victoria Ashwood, who was screaming for help in the sea of flames, I remained completely indifferent. I even shut the door to the escape route on my way out. In this life, you and my bastard of a brother can be damned together. 1. Sincere, save me, I'm begging you, save me. Thick smoke billowed as flames licked the sky. I stood frozen, a sudden, staggering realization dawning on me. I had been reborn. Reborn right at the beginning of this nightmare in my past life. I had rushed into the fire without a second thought to save Victoria. The moment the ceiling collapsed, I even shielded her with my own body. The result, I suffered severe burns over 80% of my body and was permanently disfigured. Victoria, however, escaped with only minor burns. Afterward, she knelt by my hospital bed, vowing to take care of me for the rest of her life. But then she turned around and married that illegitimate half-brother of mine. My own family grew to despise my crippled state, showering all their affection on that bastard. In the end, they locked me in the basement and left me to starve. Sincere, I'm so scared, please come and save me, Victoria's cries continued. Meanwhile, the fire raged, growing more intense by the second. The building groaned and cracked with alarming explosions. Faced with this, I didn't hesitate. I sprinted for the emergency exit, leaving her to scream and beg behind me. Serves you right, this is your karma, without me to shield her. That woman was doomed to pay the price for her hypocrisy. When I inquired about Victoria at the hospital, I learned she was on the brink of death, her life hanging by a thread. They said it took several resuscitation attempts just to keep her breathing. Of course, breathing was all she was doing. The burns covered over 70% of her body. Her face was destroyed, and there was a high probability she would be paralyzed for life. Hearing this news, I almost laughed out loud. I had to cover my mouth, feigning a look of anguish. That bitch, she deserved it. Outwardly, I acted as if my heart was shattered, playing the role of the devoted boyfriend to perfection. Victoria's parents, Mr. and Mrs. Ashwood, were devastated after seeing their daughter's condition, fainting repeatedly. They spared no expense, flying in experts from all over for consultations, but the conclusion was always the same. Victoria was ruined for life. Not only that, but she had also completely lost the ability to have children. It made sense. Her lower body was charred. With her uterus gone, what could anyone expect? At this news, Reginald Ashwood collapsed on the spot. The Ashwoods came from a respected old family that placed the highest value on continuing their bloodline. Victoria was their only daughter. Her condition meant that the Ashwood family line would end with them. That very evening, her parents began researching the possibility of surrogacy. I was all too familiar with this kind of reaction. That's just how people are. Their grief was real, but it wouldn't last forever. They would always find a new hope, a new replacement, just like after I was severely burned in my past life. 2. At first, my father, Harrison Rothschild, didn't say anything, but eventually, faced with the prospect of having no successor for the company, he acknowledged the illegitimate son he'd had with Linda Moon after a one-night stand years ago, making him the new heir. This son, Damien, was hard-working, intelligent, and handsome, a perfect fit for the ideal son my father had always envisioned. In the end, when Victoria chose to marry Damien, my father and the rest of my family simply let it happen. They gave all their love to that bastard, along with everything I once had. I didn't blame Damien at first, but after being schemed against and framed by him time and time again, I finally saw the true colors of that ungrateful snake. He would always visit me, pretending to be concerned, only to sigh with a look of guilt as he left. If anyone asked, he'd say, "Don't blame my brother. It's my fault. I'm not worthy of this family. I took everything that belonged to him. I deserve any resentment he feels." He also loved to flaunt how much Victoria relied on and doted on him, forcing me to look at their intimate photos one by one. The more agonizing my pain, the more smug Damien became. And Victoria, the woman I had risked my life to save, condoned it all. I later found out that it was her idea for my father to acknowledge his illegitimate son. She was the one who personally introduced that bastard to my father. Even then, I suspected that wretched pair had been carrying on behind my back. I just didn't have the energy or the means to investigate at the time. But this time, I would drag every hidden truth into the light. After leaving the hospital, I drove home. My parents, Harrison and Margaret, were visibly relieved to see me return safely. Like Victoria, I am their only son. If I weren't, that bastard never would have had his chance. Dad, Mom, even though this has happened to Victoria, I won't give up on her. I'll stay by her side. We can talk about the future once she recovers. Hearing this, a gratified smile spread across my father's face, and he nodded repeatedly. Our families had been friends for generations. Abandoning Victoria at a time like this would have been unthinkable. My son has grown up. It's time you started taking over the company. He looked at me with open admiration. In his heart, I was his pride and joy. I had always been a top student, bright and capable. My business acumen was exceptional, making me stand out among the heirs of the city's elite families. That was why he couldn't accept the reality of me being a cripple. He would rather pour all his resources into grooming that illegitimate son to replace me, just to reclaim his sense of superiority. For my father, that feeling of superiority was indispensable, but the person who provided it could be replaced at any time. A month passed, and Victoria still showed no signs of waking up, but I visited her every day, caring for her with unwavering devotion. Reginald and Eleanor Ashwood were deeply moved by my loyalty, secretly bestowing upon me numerous valuable gifts. I accepted every single one. Of course, these gifts came with a price. 3. Seeing Mr. and Mrs. Ashwood withering away day by day, I couldn't bear it the next day. I took them to a children's home. Mr. and Mrs. Ashwood, I suggested sincerely, have you considered adopting a child? They both stood there, stunned. For a long moment they were speechless. I knew exactly what they were thinking. There was shock, confusion, and hesitation in their eyes, but absolutely no refusal. I had already done my research. They had tried IVF, but it had failed. They were too old now, their bodies unable to handle it. The matter had been weighing heavily on them, and they were already secretly looking into adoption. They had no other choice. Reginald's cousins were all eyeing the Ashwood family fortune. Rather than letting it fall into the hands of those greedy relatives, it was better to raise an obedient child who would at least be grateful. Their only hesitation was that Victoria might be upset if she woke up. Adopting a child now would seem too cruel, but that was no longer a problem, because I was here. Please don't be so quick to refuse, I urged, my eyes welling up. This suggestion isn't just for me, it's for Victoria's sake. She is the most filial daughter. How could she bear to see you two grow old and lonely, with no one to care for you? I took their hands and guided them into the home. Though they protested verbally, their gazes were captured by the group of innocent, lively children. Their eyes gradually filled with a loving and hopeful light. Their protests died on their lips. Soon they were discussing with me which child was the most endearing. After a morning of deliberation, they went home with a thick stack of files to review. Looking pleased, things progressed quickly. The Ashwoods ended up adopting a 6-year-old boy, whom they named Leo. They held a grand adoption ceremony, inviting many prominent families. At the party, someone snidely remarked that the Ashwoods were heartless, looking to adopt an outsider while their daughter wasn't even dead yet. They were unfit to be parents. I immediately shot back. Hold your tongue, outsiders have no right to judge. They are doing this entirely at my suggestion. I am Victoria's fiancé. With her indisposed, it is my duty to be filial on her behalf. My voice boomed with conviction. Seeing them in so much pain was like a knife to my heart. Rather than let them suffer, it's better to adopt a child to bring them some joy. If Victoria were awake, I know she would approve of my decision on the stage. Reginald and Eleanor's eyes turned red, and they dabbed at their tears. With me taking charge, the rest of the event went smoothly. As I was leaving, Eleanor pulled me aside again, pressing a set of keys and property deeds into my hand. Their combined value was over $10 million. On the way back, a sudden incident shattered the calm. A young man appeared out of nowhere in front of our mansion, blocking the car as it was about to enter the gates. The driver, Mr. Benson, slammed on the brakes. The inertia threw us both forward. Once the dizziness subsided, I pushed open the car door. That familiar yet unfamiliar, handsome face came into view. A cold smirk touched my lips. Damien Rothschild. Long time no see. When Damien saw me get out of the car, he looked as if he'd seen a ghost. His face went pale as he blurted out, "Sincere Rothschild, you're still alive? Weren't you supposed to be burned into a vegetative state?" Before he could say more, Mr. Benson rushed forward to push him away, scolding, "Where did this lunatic come from? Blocking the car and cursing the young master, do you have a death wish?" But Damien shoved Mr. Benson aside and rushed to the car window, pounding on it frantically and screaming, "Father, it's me. I'm your son with Linda Moon. Don't you remember me? Please, just look at me." My father, still shaken, stared at Damien's crazed state in utter confusion. Seeing that Mr. Benson had Damien under control, my father scrambled out of the car, grabbed my arm, and tried to pull me back in. "Sincere, get in the car, the man's insane," he yelled in a panic. To Damien, those words were a thunderbolt. His eyes instantly reddened. He continued to plead hysterically, trying to recount every moment he had ever shared with my father. However, all he received in return was my father's assessment. Nutcase Damien, who had been coddled and cherished by my father in our past life, had never suffered such humiliation. Even as the car drove into the estate and the gates slowly closed, Damien's heart-wrenching sobs echoed across the courtyard, a sound so desperate it made one's skin crawl. My father, of course, paid the incident no mind, dismissing it as an encounter with a deranged person. But I saw it all clearly. Damien had been reborn too. Just like me, he retained the memories of his past life. According to the old timeline, this should have been the moment he was introduced to my parents by Victoria. But now, everything had changed. The one lying in a hospital bed on the verge of death was Victoria. There was no one left to pull the strings for him. Furthermore, the Ashwood family had kept the news of Victoria's severe injuries under tight wraps. As an ordinary student, Damien had no way of knowing the truth. That's why he panicked and resorted to such a desperate act, trying to force his way back into my father's life. A few days later, the investigation report on Victoria and Damien arrived on my desk. It was a thick file. Inside were the detailed records of their sordid secret love affair. They had met 2 years ago. 5, a rich man's daughter and a hard-working, ambitious poor student. It didn't take long for them to fall for each other. At the time, Victoria was still with me, acting all lovey-dovey in public while carrying on with Damien behind my back. Victoria wanted to help Damien get ahead, but a poor boy like him, no matter how smart or capable, would never be accepted by the Ashwood family. That's why, after I was injured in our last life, she quickly forged a paternity test and used the excuse of caring for my father to install Damien in my place. She found the perfect home for her one true love. Even more ironically, a year before the fire, Victoria had already made Damien start studying and imitating my mannerisms and way of doing things. Reading this, I suddenly suspected that even without my heroic sacrifice in the fire, Victoria would have found a way to get Damien into my family. Of course, that would have required manufacturing some accident to leave me dead or disabled first. But I wasn't in a hurry to expose their schemes or to get my revenge on Damien. The time wasn't right. They would suffer every bit of the agony I endured, not a single drop less. Half a month later, news came from the hospital. Victoria was awake. I was at the Ashwoods' home at the time, having tea with Eleanor and bringing some toys for Leo. Upon hearing the news, Eleanor's surprise was mixed with a hint of unease. She hugged Leo tightly, speechless for a long moment. It was understandable. Victoria had been in a coma for so long that even the doctors had given up hope, assuming she would be in a vegetative state for the rest of her life. No one expected her to ever wake up. "Mrs. Ashwood, don't worry," I soothed. "Victoria is a good daughter. She will understand your difficulties. Besides, Leo is so adorable and well-behaved. She's sure to love him. You can count on me for anything." Only after my reassurance did Eleanor rush to the hospital. As it turns out, anyone who wakes up to find themselves disabled, only to learn their parents have quickly adopted a replacement, will lose their mind. The scene in the hospital room was even more chaotic than I had imagined. Victoria was in a frenzy, smashing everything within reach, her face a mask of ferocity. "You're not human. I'm not even dead. And you've already brought home a little stray. The Ashwood fortune is mine. No one is allowed to take it." This terrified Reginald and Eleanor, especially Leo, who had been brought along to officially meet his new sister. He was just a child. He'd never seen anything like it. Even though he was frightened, he didn't back down. Instead, he puffed out his small chest and stood in front of his adoptive parents. "Mommy, Daddy, don't be afraid. Leo will protect you." In that instant, tears of gratitude streamed down their faces. After a few hasty words, they left with Leo in tow. 6. Their departing figures were stark and resolute. Victoria sat stunned on the hospital bed, her mind a complete blank. She couldn't comprehend how an adopted outsider could have stolen everything from her so quickly. The answer was actually quite obvious. It was because of Leo. The boy was a genius among geniuses. His linguistic talent was astounding. In just a few weeks, he was speaking English fluently. He showed even more astonishing aptitude in the arts. At the adoption party, a simple melody he played on the piano earned him thunderous praise from the music masters in attendance. A famous concert pianist even declared on the spot that he would take Leo on as his final personal student. Shortly after starting school, he had mastered the curriculum of the upper grades, acing every exam. He quickly became the child prodigy everyone in high society was talking about. In the past few weeks, he had brought Reginald and Eleanor no small amount of pride. In contrast, there was Victoria, hysterical and prone to fits of rage, taking her frustrations out on everyone, and now a cripple. It was truly disheartening. "Victoria, can't you be a little more understanding? Have you ever thought about how much your parents have given for you over the years? How much pain they've endured? I was the only one who had stayed behind." My face was a mask of disappointment. If it weren't for Leo's arrival, they would have broken down by now. "Did you want to watch them fall apart?" With that, I angrily slammed the door and left. Her hysterical screams immediately followed from within the room. Leaning against the door outside, listening to that sound, I felt an indescribable sense of satisfaction. Don't call me cruel. This was merely a reenactment of what she had done to me in our past life. Back then, as I lay in that hospital bed, I watched my parents laughing and bonding with Damien, as if I didn't even exist. When Victoria saw the dark look on my face, she immediately began to lecture me. She called me narrow-minded and unfilial. She said that by not accepting Damien, I was pushing my parents to their graves. I was frantic and panicked at the time. The truth was, the nerves in my face were dead. I couldn't make any expressions at all. But no one wanted to listen to me. Victoria simply took my parents and left, telling me to reflect on my behavior. Did anyone ever care about my inner turmoil? The Victoria of today could at least speak and move her upper body. The me of the past life was completely paralyzed. Except for my eyes and mouth, I couldn't move a thing. The pain I endured was far greater than what she was suffering now. After I left, Victoria continued her tantrums for several more days. At first, Reginald and Eleanor still cared for their daughter. But Victoria's inability to control her temper and her constant verbal abuse of Leo gradually wore them down. They became utterly disappointed in her. Eventually, they stopped visiting the hospital altogether, claiming it was to give Victoria time to calm down and rest properly. 7. They specifically instructed the hospital staff and nurses that no one was allowed to visit. They were afraid Victoria would say something she shouldn't and damage the family's reputation. I was the only one with access. By then, I had firmly established my place in the Ashwood family. Not only did Reginald and Eleanor treat me like their own son, but even Leo was particularly close to me, calling me brother with a smile every day. Eleanor would often hold my hand and say, "Sincere, once this difficult period is over, I'm going to officially adopt you as my godson. You're such a good boy, I've seen everything you've done." Everyone knew the unspoken truth. In Victoria's current state, she had no hope of finding a good husband. A young master from a family like mine couldn't possibly be expected to take care of her for the rest of his life. What I was doing now was already more than anyone could ask for. By offering to make me her godson, Eleanor could maintain our close relationship while avoiding future complications. For the next few days, I visited the hospital like clockwork. Each time I saw Victoria, I would berate her for being selfish and narrow-minded. Then I would leave. Day after day of this, and Victoria finally broke. She found a way to bribe a nurse to contact someone for her. Damien Rothschild, the man she loved most. Damien rushed to the hospital as soon as he got the message. Seeing the disfigured Victoria in the hospital bed, he covered his mouth in horror, tears streaming down his face. "Vicky, what happened? Don't scare me." Damien had never expected this outcome. He thought I was there to protect Victoria. How could this have happened? It was all that bastard Sincere. He saw me in danger and did nothing. He just ran away to save himself. If it weren't for him, I wouldn't be like this. After listening to Victoria, Damien froze for a long time, finally understanding the key to the situation. He then told Victoria everything about his own rebirth and the events of their past life. They analyzed the situation for a long time. Finally, they came to a bitter, teeth-grinding conclusion. Their current predicament was all my fault. Why wasn't I willing to risk my life to save Victoria? It was all because I was too selfish. They had to get revenge. They had to take back everything they had lost. And I, watching this unfold on the security monitor, let out a cold laugh. Of course. It's true what they say about a bitch and a bastard deserving each other. Each one is more shameless than the last. Soon, Victoria began her plan. She became uncharacteristically quiet and obedient. When I visited, she would even force a smile, as if nothing had happened. Seeing this, Reginald and Eleanor finally softened and started visiting her at the hospital from time to time. Of course. 8. They always brought their precious son Leo with them. Whenever they talked about the boy, his parents couldn't help but gush with praise. "Oh, Vicky. That Leo is a true genius. He just got first place on his exams again. And when he got home, he played a piano solo for us. When Leo grows up and makes something of himself, he'll definitely take good care of you." At times like these, Victoria's face was a colorful palette of suppressed fury. She would grit her teeth and force herself to echo their praise for Leo, while internally she wanted to tear him limb from limb. A month later, Victoria couldn't hold back any longer. She impatiently blurted out her true intentions. "Mom, Dad, I want to marry Sincere. I know I'm not good enough for him now, but I swear I'll do my best to get better. We truly love each other. I know Sincere won't abandon me." A dead silence fell over the room. Seeing no response, Victoria bit her lip and threatened that if they didn't agree, she would jump from the hospital roof. The moment I pushed the door open, she grabbed my wrist, insisting that I go to City Hall with her immediately. She had even already set a wedding date. A crowd quickly gathered in the hospital corridor. People were murmuring, and some were even live streaming with their phones. They clamored that Victoria had ended up in this state because she had saved me. The implication was clear. If I didn't agree to marry her, I was an ungrateful wretch. Victoria then unleashed an Oscar-level performance, suddenly grabbing a scalpel and holding it to her own wrist. "Sincere, saving you was my choice. I don't want to force you," she cried. "I'll just end my own life." This scene made the onlookers turn on me. This man is so heartless. He's completely cold-blooded. It's just a marriage. What's the big deal? She saved your life, for God's sake. As the situation spiraled out of control, Reginald, who had been silent, finally stepped forward. He snatched the scalpel from Victoria's hand and roared, "Stop this! Your mother and I have already recognized Sincere as our godson. You two are brother and sister. Now give up this ridiculous idea." It was only then that Reginald understood. Victoria's recent good behavior, which had convinced them to dismiss all her private nurses, was all a setup for today's drama. The crowd of onlookers was most likely hired by her in advance. Then Eleanor, her voice filled with heartbreak, added, "Vicky, my dear, not only is your face ruined, but you can't have children anymore. By insisting on marrying Sincere, aren't you just ruining his life? 9. Marrying you would mean his family line ends with him." A gasp went through the crowd of onlookers. This girl can't have kids? So she's a barren hen, and she still wants to get married? She's just trying to ruin someone's life. Her parents are the reasonable ones, looking out for the young man. Victoria's face turned ashen. She trembled, her fists clenched so tight her knuckles were white. She wished the ground would swallow her whole. To have a woman's most private matter discussed so publicly was the ultimate humiliation. What broke her most was that the person who revealed it was her own mother. Who could possibly accept that? Just as public opinion turned completely against her, someone from the crowd stepped forward to speak up for Victoria, shouting righteously, "Fine, don't get married, but she ended up like this saving you, so you owe her some compensation. At the very least, you should give her half of your family's fortune." And Victoria, meeting my gaze, gave a cold, sinister smile. She was clearly banking on the fact that there were no cameras or witnesses in the fire, allowing her to fabricate the lie that she had saved me. She had made the first move. Even if I denied it, I would be branded as ungrateful. Either way, she stood to gain. Victoria pressed her advantage, describing in vivid detail how I had passed out from the smoke and how she had risked her life to carry me out of the fire, losing her own chance to escape in the process. Her moving story brought tears to the eyes of many in the crowd. Just then, a swarm of reporters burst into the room and immediately surrounded me. "Mr. Rothschild, may we have a moment? You rushed into the fire multiple times to save people. What gave you such courage? Mr. Rothschild, will you be attending the city's awards ceremony?" Everyone in the room stared at each other in confusion. One of the reporters held up his phone. The headlines of every major news outlet were all about me. Heir to fortune fearlessly enters blaze to rescue multiple victims. Survivors post videos thanking the brave young man hero revealed to be son of city, his most prominent entrepreneur, and so on. Next to the bold red headlines were photos and videos of me at the scene. In the footage, I moved with agility, using my professional judgment of the building's structure and the fire's behavior to put my life on the line. Time and again I charged deep into the inferno, carrying or supporting more than a dozen people to safety. Even covered in soot, I didn't back down. I only left quietly after the firefighters arrived. Although the security footage was a bit blurry, it clearly documented everything in that moment. 10. All eyes turned to Victoria. It was obvious to everyone in my current state, why would I have needed her to save me? Besides, hadn't she just said I was unconscious at the time? Then who was the vigorous person in the video? A ghost? Victoria's face was ashen, and she trembled uncontrollably. After a long pause, she stammered, I must have misremembered." Her words sent the room into an uproar. Reginald and Eleanor were mortified, glaring at their disappointing daughter with utter contempt. On the drive back, I opened my phone's browser. Just as I expected, the internet was flooded with denunciations of Victoria's hypocrisy. Everything that happened in the hospital room had been broadcast live. The people Victoria had hired had cut the stream early when things went south, but the team I'd hired stayed on until the very end. I had even upgraded my data plans specifically to ensure this spectacular show was recorded in its entirety. Indeed, I had anticipated every move Victoria would make. Those security cameras weren't just for show. Every twist and turn of today's drama was under my control. It was no surprise that Reginald and Eleanor sided with me. Beyond our family's long-standing friendship, it was because I had revealed Victoria's true nature. She wasn't just trying to ruin me, she had also been secretly selling Ashwood Corporation's trade secrets to a competitor, all to get back at her parents. Under these circumstances, they were eager to disown her, let alone help me with this small matter. As for the fire rescue, every detail was true. After I left Victoria behind, I saw the swirling flames and the panicked crowd. My heart twisted, remembering my own struggle to survive the fire in my past life. I knew that feeling of despair all too well. I had to save them. I had taken firefighting training and my physical fitness was good. With the knowledge from my rebirth, I plunged into the inferno without hesitation. Even as I choked on smoke and was seared by the flames, I gritted my teeth and pushed on. I couldn't stand to see others repeat my fate and suffer that kind of pain. After the rescue, I left quietly. Not because I was so noble, but because I believe in timing. Good deeds should be revealed at the most opportune moment, like now. As for Damien, he was currently in a holding cell, waiting for someone to post bail. He had no one to blame but himself for believing Victoria and trying to steal trade secrets from the Ashwood Corporation. Reginald was truly furious this time, and had instructed his lawyers not to yield an inch. His stance was firm. Even if it was only an attempt, what Damien did was serious enough for a heavy sentence. But I had no time to worry about that. My schedule was packed. Major media outlets were clamoring for interviews, and television appearances followed one after another. Company affairs were even more demanding because of this heroic act. 11. The company's stock price soared, reaching a new all-time high. My father, having long planned for this, began to gradually hand over the reins of the company to me. My mother was busy attending banquets and social events, beaming with pride as guests praised me. What was even more surprising was that Reginald Ashwood, as a token of his gratitude, revoked all of Victoria's shares in his company. He then gave a portion of them to me, calling it a gift for officially becoming his godson. This period of peace didn't last long. News came from the holding cell about Damien. It turned out Damien and Victoria had a child, but that wasn't the main point. The key was, Victoria herself didn't know the child existed, but Damien insisted the child's mother was Victoria. Apparently, they had frozen his sperm and her eggs abroad. To bind himself to Victoria, Damien had secretly used a surrogate to have their child. Reginald and Eleanor rushed over that very night. After an investigation, they found that this illegitimate child was already a year old. At first, they didn't believe it, but Damien's story was coherent and he had evidence. He even produced a paternity test and a large number of intimate photos of himself with Victoria. Seeing his confidence, the Ashwoods began to waver. As for Victoria, when she heard the news, her entire demeanor changed. She ignored her injuries and insisted on seeing Damien. Her reaction made it obvious to everyone that they had been involved for a long time. Getting a DNA test was just a formality. The results came back quickly. The child was indeed Victoria's. Well, that settled it. Reginald and Eleanor were completely and utterly disappointed in Victoria. This proved she had been two-timing me with Damien all along. With the child as his trump card, Damien's ego soared. He complained about the conditions in the holding cell and demanded to be released on medical bail. He was constantly thinking about buying designer brands, and at the slightest inconvenience he would threaten to take the child and leave. Although the Ashwoods were grinding their teeth in frustration, for the sake of their family's reputation, they had no choice but to swallow their pride and accept it. But Damien's appetite grew larger and larger. He demanded a wedding with Victoria. Not just a marriage license, but a grand, extravagant ceremony. This put the Ashwoods in a difficult position. A wedding? That meant formally acknowledging Damien as their son-in-law. From then on, they would be family. The problem was, everyone knew that I was Victoria's fiancé. Although we had broken up, a quick calculation of the illegitimate child's age made it clear Victoria had been cheating. Damien was the other man who had successfully usurped my position. I was at the height of my popularity. If news got out that I had been cuckolded, Victoria, Damien, and the entire Ashwood family would likely be dragged through the mud. They wanted to delay, but Damien couldn't wait. 12. He no longer cared about public opinion or slander. He was sick of living in obscurity. In his past life, Victoria had paved the way for him into high society. This time, he had to fight for it himself. When the Ashwoods delayed their answer, Damien threw all caution to the wind. He immediately posted their intimate photos on social media with the caption, "Love will prevail." Wedding date coming soon. By the time Reginald and Eleanor found out, it was too late. The comments section under Damien's post had exploded. Netizens had dug up information about his illegitimate child and videos of him and Victoria being affectionate before the fire. The fact that Victoria had cheated was set in stone. The entire internet was condemning the wretched pair. However, these accusations had no effect on Victoria and Damien. What scruples could two morally bankrupt people possibly have? Damien even shamelessly retorted to the netizens, "Who says I'm a toy boy?" In the face of true love, nothing else matters. Love isn't about who came first, it's about who is true. We will grow old together. Their unilateral actions nearly gave Reginald and Eleanor a heart attack. But what was done was done. After weighing the pros and cons, they had to concede to Damien's terms. They knew it would bring shame and damage the company's image, but they couldn't afford to think about that now. It was all for that child. They were willing to pay any price. Not only that, but they also agreed to Damien's other outrageous demands, such as taking back the company shares they had gifted to me and sending Leo, whom they had just brought home, back to the children's home. I could turn a blind eye to the other matters, but when it came to Leo, I couldn't bear it. We had grown close, and I couldn't watch him suffer the pain of abandonment again. Despite my passionate arguments, the Ashwoods remained stubborn, insisting that blood was thicker than water. They even said they had only taken Leo in because they had no heir. Now that they had their own flesh and blood, they naturally had to cut ties with outsiders. Their words left me speechless. Tired of arguing with these ungrateful people, I took Leo to my own home. My parents welcomed him warmly. Since I was now running the company, they had plenty of free time at home. Looking after Leo was a joy for them. Because of the Ashwoods' absurd actions, the stock price of their corporation plummeted. Discontent was rampant throughout the company. Everyone agreed that Reginald was too selfish. How could such a large enterprise be subject to his personal whims? As the chairman, how could he be so reckless? Seizing this opportunity, Reginald's cousins poached many of his key employees. In contrast, my career was flourishing. The public's contempt for Victoria and Damien was matched only by their sympathy and support for me. Voices in my favor rose from all corners. 7 days later, Victoria and Damien held their wedding. 13. Reginald and Eleanor spent a fortune. Having chosen to accept this grandchild, they had to see it through to the end. But even though the wedding was magnificently decorated, very few guests attended. Who would deign to attend the wedding of a morally degenerate couple? Rumor has it that after the event, a furious Damien smashed several $1 million worth of expensive jewelry. And Victoria had the audacity to text me, demanding an explanation. "Sincere Rothschild, this is all your doing, isn't it? You must be so pleased to see me humiliated. Let me tell you, I could never love you in this lifetime. One day I'll make you regret this." I was amused. I immediately replied, "Are you daydreaming or just delusional? Is your mouth exclusively for spouting nonsense? I suggest you see a psychiatrist after that." I blocked her immediately. 2 months later, I received a message. Damien's child was not from the surrogacy with Victoria's egg. It was his child with another woman. Well, there it was. The Ashwoods' perfect plan had completely fallen apart. For this child, they had lost all face and offended countless people. The resentment from their company's senior management was about to boil over. The two of them, unwilling to accept this, even suspected I was behind it. They thought this was my revenge. I didn't hesitate. I called the police immediately. The investigation proved my complete innocence. The police also stated that Damien had deliberately faked the paternity test to deceive the Ashwood family. It was entirely their own fault. Upon hearing the news, Reginald and Eleanor completely broke down and were both hospitalized. By the time they were discharged, they discovered that their company had changed hands. Reginald's cousin had long been secretly buying up shares and winning over support. Reginald's position as chairman was gone. This series of blows aged them immensely. What was worse, they still had to deal with the chaos caused by Victoria and Damien at the hospital. Ever since she found out the child wasn't hers, Victoria was like a different person. She physically attacked Damien daily, and their fights were incessant. Gradually, the Ashwoods lost all hope for their daughter. They left her a sum of money and then disappeared. And Damien, as soon as he got the money, he became arrogant and reckless. He unceremoniously dumped Victoria in a basement and washed his hands of her. The basement he left her in was the very same one where I had died in my previous life. Later, Victoria died. Just like me in my past life, she starved to death, all alone in that basement. She had called Damien for help multiple times, but he didn't care at all. Instead, he accused her of being too fragile, unable to shake her spoiled princess attitude. It wasn't until a week after her death that a tardy Damien finally found her body. 14. For this, Damien was sentenced to death. Only after everything was over did Reginald and Eleanor finally reappear. This time, after handling Victoria's funeral, they didn't rush to leave. Instead, they sought me out, or more accurately, they were looking for Leo. The successive deaths of their daughter and son-in-law had finally made them remember the boy they had once cast aside for a supposed blood heir. Old age combined with the series of devastating blows had made them let go of their obsession with bloodlines. A pity. Leo was no longer here. You too may not be aware, but Leo has returned to his biological parents, I informed them. He is the youngest son of the richest man in Asia. He was lost in an accident years ago and ended up at the children's home. As I spoke, I showed them the relevant news articles on my phone. Richest man in Asia's youngest son finally returns home. Mystery benefactor revealed an act of gratitude. Magnate invests heavily in Rothschild Corporation, the legendary. Life of sincere Rothschild. Good deeds always pay off at that moment. Reginald and Eleanor finally understood what a monumental opportunity they had thrown away. If they hadn't abandoned Leo back then, his biological parents, out of gratitude for raising him, would have rewarded them handsomely, just as I was being rewarded now. However, it was too late for regrets. That fortune was not meant for them. They could only offer a few hollow words about how good deeds are rewarded before hastily taking their leave. Watching the old couple walk away, a smile played on my lips. In truth, I was never as benevolent as I appeared. I had known Leo's true identity from the very beginning. In my past life, while I was bedridden in the hospital, the media had reported it. Asia's richest man's young son, victimized by enemies, starves to death in orphanage. The details were too gruesome to bear. Now reborn, I was determined to seize every opportunity. It was I who intentionally guided the Ashwoods to that specific children's home. I even had the director specially recommend Leo. My investigation had revealed that Leo had lost his memory when he first arrived at the home. But he was still exceptionally intelligent. I knew a child like that would be chosen by the Ashwoods. Unfortunately for them, they were too cold and selfish, abandoning Leo for their own daughter. And that gave me the perfect, justifiable reason to take him in without raising suspicion. I had served them the opportunity on a silver platter. It was their own fault they failed to grasp it. Damien's illegitimate child was also within my calculations. In the last life, he had a secret child as well, but he hid it well, and Victoria never found out. In this life, my presence forced him to show his hand early. 15. I secretly sent someone to tell Damien that the Ashwoods never intended to accept him. They planned to kick him out as soon as he transferred custody of the child. This is what drove him to frantically publicize his relationship with Victoria, willing to bear the shame of being a toy boy. To secure his position, Damien demanded marriage, the expulsion of Leo, a share of the company, and money. The Ashwoods could have refused these demands, but for the sake of a grandson they chose to indulge him. And so, in the end, everything they built their hopes on turned to dust. As for that grim basement, I didn't have to lift a finger. Damien walked right into the trap himself. In reality, Damien knew perfectly well the danger of leaving Victoria alone in a basement, but he did it intentionally. Just as he had deliberately tortured me in our past life, he tortured Victoria in this one. Once Victoria was dead, the Ashwood family's assets would fall into his hands. All I did was call the police when Victoria was on the verge of death. Let him and Victoria keep each other company on the road to hell. Later, my career soared, and I led the company to new heights, and my parents began to act like any other elders, pressuring me into an arranged marriage. They had planned out what they considered an ideal path for me. When I flatly refused, my father felt he had lost face. To punish me and bring me to heel, he returned to the business world, attempting to seize back control of the company. Only then did he realize how much things had changed. His authority had been gradually replaced by mine over the years. Many people in the company didn't even recognize him. His orders were ignored. My father, of course, was not one to give up. He sought out old partners, friends, and investors, but found no support. After hitting a wall time and time again, my father finally understood. He had lost. I was no longer a pawn he could manipulate. I would forever be the pride and joy he boasted of, and he could only live on, attached to that pride. This was precisely my ultimate goal, the tragedy of my past life. Were Victoria and Damien the only true villains? Weren't my parents also accomplices? They may not have laid a hand on me or schemed against me, but they abandoned me. They cut off my hope of survival. Sometimes, a bystander is just as hateful as a perpetrator. Lying in that hospital bed for all those years, I had seen through it all. 16. If I could climb to the highest, most untouchable position, even if I lost the ability to move, no one would dare to cast me aside. Women? Family? Friendship? All of it can turn to smoke. Only power and achievement are eternal. Reborn, my path has never been clearer. I cast off all attachments and threw myself into my work. I will never let anyone have the chance to hurt me again. I will never let anyone have the chance to abandon me again. I will make everyone look up to me, make everyone submit to me. I will make them all understand I, Sincere Rothschild, am not some weak man to be trifled with. I am a force, a man who can master the destiny of others. The end.